So welcome, everyone. This is a conversation in preparation for a collaboration that we have planned for 2024, the Riviera Seminar, with Miles Kessler, myself, Patrick Cassidy, and our special guest instructor, Bruno Gonzalez. And I'd like to welcome them both to this evening's conversation in preparation for this event that we're going to be doing next year, along the theme of unity in diversity.
And if I just look back at my whole kind of Aikido path, my career, it's gone from sameness to difference to sameness to difference to sameness to difference to sameness to difference. It's like a constant change, you know. I did, and then when I went to Japan, I kind of studied hardcore there for the first 5 years. Was really me just kind of getting like intaking that style, just really like kind of getting it into the bones. And then I started to feel hitting the glass ceiling. The context was super clear, and there's a very clear cultural style to it. But and that was great because I developed a lot within that style. But then I hit a glass ceiling, and I was not seeing people around me going beyond that glass ceiling. So it required me. The last 3 years that I was there, I was kind of, Patrick, you and I were there, but we were exploring. We were looking for other stuff. We were trying to feel in, get what we weren't getting in that particular style, and it required me to go out. And I went out in many ways. I went out, through spiritual practice, through meditation, through Buddhism, through other, tasting a little bit from other martial arts, especially working with masters and. Kind of, let's say, martial geniuses in another context that really started to open up for me. So there was already this kind of unity, diversity, practicing in the sameness and getting, integrating that deeply through conforming to that sameness, but then going out into differences, which really stimulated, it forced me to learn and grow. Teaching everything that I do, there's a lot of unity that I tried to kind of create. But I also realize that people don't grow unless there's some challenge, some diversity, and that approach of finding the unity to develop, but then also finding the diversity that forces you to innovate and be creative. It's like a ladder. It's like a developmental ladder. So that's me, and that's how I relate to this topic.
Bruno, if I could pass the baton on to you.
Yes. Thank you. So about me, I started Aikido, I was 15. So now it's 35 years of practice, something like that. And I devote all my time, all my life to the practice. And next Aikido, I have some experiences with different art who also helped me to understand more about the principles in Aikido, and so I think I become quite early a researcher, and so I'm completely diving in my practice, trying to create link between situation, between people. That's why I am more and more. I focus on principles. It means focus on some constant, universal constant between things. And because I think one of the main message of Aikido is to get peaceful. And to become peaceful, you need to be aware of what we have in common, or what is our nature in a way. All my pedagogy, my training are focused on that. In order to see the opponent not like an opponent, but like a partner.
Right.
I mean, to get some freedom from the constraint without the wish to change the constraint. Okay. I think the feeling is to be able to see some information instead something that you have to change. So what it's this kind of things who lead my my practice, and I try to share it with
right. No, thank you, Bruno. I resonate a lot with your interest in exploring the principles of Aikido, and I think that fundamentally, for me, has been one of my points of interest. When I started Aikido, I also had started yoga and was also an early practitioner of meditation. And the three practices for me fundamentally have continued from the beginning till now, where I feel that have share a common ground and kind of a universal experience, a universal nature about them, or that they are approaching a certain kind of universal experience within the practices. If meditation were to be an exploration of a non-resistive relationship with my mind, with my experience, with the essential nature of who I am, and yoga being an expansion of that, including the body and the health of the body, and the movement of the body, Aikido would be that expansion into that in relationship with another person in conflict, and having a non-resistive, proactive relationship that brings the system back into balance. And I think there's an extraordinary amount of potential in the practice of Aikido, especially when we can go beyond the stylistic frameworks that we grow up in, and be able to reach out and include and connect with other teachers who are attempting to explore these same themes and these same principles from different lineages or different approaches, but still have fundamentally the same ground and intention in doing so. And so that kind of leads me into the question, where are you coming from, and what do you feel is the direction that you feel inspired by in terms of doing this collaboration together next year?
I mean, any type of learning environment needs to have a certain amount of unity, basically like a stable place for us to take a topic or a principle or a method or a technology to learn it. So there has to be stable conditions. And it requires us, it's going to require me and my kind of undeveloped sense of self, my undeveloped ego, to conform to that. So in a way, I go in and I'm moving towards unity. And I think we see that very much in the early stages of, not just the early stages, but for many years for people in Aikido, a lot of the training is going to be about conformity of the form. So they're kind of they're learning how to conform to the form, because the forms contain the principles. Is that when I tap deeper into the principles automatically begin to change the form. In other words, the form evolves.
Sure.
My form, I'm not copying what my teacher was doing and sharpening that and getting better and better at that. Of course, I do that. But then when the principle itself becomes internalized, then it starts to actually have a transformative effect on the form. The form becomes alive. And in many cases, it changes. It evolves. It changes in a better way. But there's that whole tension between kind of sameness and difference there, that I have to kind of force myself to conform to the form, certainly in the early years of a person's Aikido training, until they tap the principles. And then when they tap the principles, they have to, in a way, do a little bit the opposite, but not too soon. They have to start to kind of relax the form so the principle can take on a certain life. Unity, but it's not internal, it's not yet internalized.
Sure. Okay.
But it takes all the differences, in all of our bad habits of the body, and our fight, flight, freeze, and our fighting and resisting and running away, and all that stuff has to be calmed down so I can fit into this form. And in one sense, the form and the dojo and the teaching and the students around me are going to kind of hold me within a system that I can start to assimilate that system. But at a certain point, that system that's holding me has to be let go to where the principles have a free expression.
Sure.
I make it's like a scientific who take a microscope to see what's going in the drop of blood, for example.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have the microscope, you cannot understand what there is in the drop of blood. So I take this microscope, and so in a way I make the practice or the movement or the understanding a little bit more complex, because you see more things, and everything is more complicated from outside, because if you see one action with a microscope, you can see 10 actions inside, you know. So but this process was a process of structuration, and he helped me, he gave me the opportunity to see the link between the things, between the situation, between the techniques, between the whatever. And as soon as you start to see these links, it becomes more simple, because those links are the principles. So I start from something very didactic, very analytic, very yes, like a scientific, you know. And so when I was teaching at this moment, I was proposing in very detailed things, pedagogic situation. You know, the movement was instead to have just one movement, one fluid movement, maybe I cut the movement according 10 action or 20 action. So it was quite heavy in a way. But for me, it was a process of simplification, because yes, I had this microscope, and I can understand the rules, how it works between techniques, between situation, between attacks and everything. As soon as I get more sensitive with all these principles, because you rediscover, it's not just that, of course, I knew by mind the concept of the principle, but it's not enough. I mean, you need to discover and to get sensitive of that. So as soon as these links were more clear for me, I stopped to be analytic like that, and I just let my movement more inspiring by the principles. But it was this story, you know. I start to complicate the things in order to be more sensitive and more simple. And I think it's difficult to say to someone, "Oh, you need to be relaxed. You need to not resist." Because okay, of course, you can understand mentally the things, but you need to have a really deep understanding of the things, and for that, you need to take your microscope. You know.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a nice metaphor you're using, and I can resonate a lot with, you know, the idea of slowing down a process so that you have the capacity to kind of appreciate what's showing up in the process, which is so challenging, especially for beginners, because they want to get someplace in the process. You show them a technique, they want to get to the end. But by slowing down the process and feeling into and placing the experience under a microscope, I can see that as being a potential window for the principle to show up and for that to be appreciated in a deeper manner. Is that kind of what you're pointing to?
Yeah, yes. And for example, when I'm teaching, I do a lot of exercise. I'm not showing the whole movement, all techniques. Say, oh, you have to do it like that. Sometimes I cut, take just the beginning. I do some different. I propose different situation, pedagogic situation. The principles become very clear. You know.
Sure.
Yeah, because for me, it's the priority of the relationship. Most of the time, when you practice people, the priority for the people is the hand who arrive, it's the fist who arrive, and it's this kind of showing situation, the specificity of the situation start to make you react. But as soon as you understand from where it comes from, it really simplifies the things, and you will manage the specificity of the situation, of course, but you start from the beginning, from the principle.
For myself, the transition between technique and a conceptual understanding of what we're doing and what we're attempting to access, and a transition from that conceptual understanding to a direct relationship with the principles, for me, has always, not always, but primarily been governed by recognizing I need to access a different kind of muscle in order to be able to recognize the principle. I can't access the principle through a conceptual understanding. I have to taste it. I have to fundamentally come into a living relationship with the principle. And then the principle fundamentally has its own intelligence and has its own, as Miles was pointing out, has its own way of expressing itself. And so it then starts to express itself through the technique, but in a fundamentally appropriate way in relationship to itself and in relationship to uke for me. And so that requires that transition to operating and appreciating principles, and at least from my perspective, seems to require letting go of attempting to control it from the level of the mind. And I think that kind of introducing that process, introducing that way of exploring and way of relating to people in Aikido is for me, is very rich and inspiring way of exploring. And it's I have a tendency to do it in tandem. It's like one class I'll do technique and we'll be very conceptually oriented, demanding a lot of uniformity and a lot of clear understanding of the angles and the way things move. And of course the principles are involved in that, but fundamentally it's governed a lot by the mind. And then I'll move into either another segment of the class or another class at another time and say, okay, now we're going to work on a quality of connection or quality of feeling in. And this is going to be determining the nature of how we're going to relate and allowing then the person to be guided by that principle rather than to be constantly attempting to get the technique to conform to the way the mind sees how the technique is supposed to be, coming back to a level of conformity. So, more simply put, we can practice Aikido inside outside, where we take what we see and we attempt to copy it, reproduce it, or we can start to look at practicing Aikido inside outside, where we start to feel the principle govern and express and manifest our movement and our response based on the moment and the situation in a level of appropriateness. And of course, that then means we have to be conscious of our intention in the process, because that fundamental conscious intentionality is what then drives the relationship, drives where I go. So I think that might be another whole conversation to do, is about what's the relationship between intention and the discovery and the exploration of principle. But maybe it might be helpful to clarify a little bit more when we say principles, what are we relating to? Go for it.
Principle is universal.
Okay.
If it's not universal, it's not a principle.
Mm-hmm.
It's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what does it mean? Universal, it means you can apply it here.
Mm-hmm.
You can apply it there in Montreux. You can apply it there in Paris, wherever you are, Bruno. You
Mm-hmm.
can apply it back 100 years ago. You can apply it today. You can apply it 100 years in the future. It's universal. All times, all places, all circumstances. Now, it may have physics to it, and the physics are going to affect it, or it could be metaphysical. But it's something that exists all times, all places, and all circumstances. So gravity, sure, gravity exists for every single body on the earth, but we also know gravity is a force throughout the universe. So gravity is the fundamental principle of physics in the universe. Centering, connection, awase, listening, creativity, spontaneous movement. These are things that everybody has access to. Everybody has the ability to do it. They may not be able to access it. So for me, the principle, it has to be universal, or it's not a principle. A technique is particular. It's not universal. a technique, the way I do kotegaeshi, the way you do kotegaeshi, the way Bruno does kotegaeshi, there's going to be differences. Subtle, gross, big differences, little differences, it doesn't matter. Techniques are diverse. There's a diversity of techniques. Not only do the three of us do kotegaeshi differently, we can do it 100 different ways. There's an endless amount of ways that we could do. There might be a finite number of ways to do kotegaeshi, but whether it's going to be an effective kotegaeshi or an ineffective kotegaeshi is going to depend on the principle. If the technique is organizing around principle of center ground connection and extension, whatever, then it's going to be an effective modality. If the principle is coming through the technique, 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, the art is alive. There's nothing, it's constantly, the battery is constantly being charged. We go to class and we work out and we train, maybe physically our battery gets down because we did some physical activity. But if we're accessing the principles, our battery is going to be constantly charged, renewed, regenerated, reawoken every single time we connect with the principles.
So to be very concrete, when I'm on the mat, okay, for example, I always speak about axes.
Okay.
Axis of the partner of okay. I'm not focusing on his harm. I'm not focusing on whatever the situation will be. If there is someone, there is an axis. Okay.
Sure.
So I'm always building my entry, my movement according to this axis because he will be there all the time. I will not try to manage the specificity of the situation with the arm. If the arm is coming that way or that way, maybe the fist will be there, maybe we're not there. So okay, at the end we manage to do a kotegaeshi or whatever. But first, I focus on the constant, and one of the constant, for example, is the axis of the partner. It will be always there. So I'm not become dependent of the particularity of the situation because first I focus on the axis. Then, if the arm is here, okay, almost like a second effect, I will manage the arm, but first the focus is on the axis. So it's one of very concrete and very physical principles I can use on the mat.
Sure.
After there are other principles like you can find in nature, for example, the concept of cycle. I mean, everything is organized around cycle. So to have to put this principle in your relationship with the partner is to bring something natural in your relation. So, but you need to put life in this form and to behave organically. And for that, you need to use the principle of nature, of what you are already, in fact, okay? Most of the time, our mind or your brain put some, let's say, some stick in the wheel, but in fact, everything is already a little bit perfect. Just principle is also that we have to trust the situation. It means the solution don't come from us, the solution comes from the situation. Most of the time, we think that we have to do something, we have to, to change the situation, to find a solution. And if we are able to listen to the situation, she give you the solution. Be able to develop your sensitivity, your attention, to be able to feel what the situation give you as information, as a solution.
And one is that principles are often, as I think you're pointing out, are accessed when shifts in understanding occur too, from the one of I want to do to I want to allow the solution to come up in the moment and to guide me in my response to discover what's the appropriate appropriate response to this moment. So I look for the solution within a systemic experience of myself, not just only from my own personal desire of what I want to do to the other person, but looking at how I relate to the other person. And that's a shift in understanding, which into a certain degree comes from a certain level of maturity, or maybe even spiritual insight. That sense of, I'm connected with the environment that I'm around. I'm part of the system that I'm involved with. I'm connected with the person that I'm training with, and the intelligence of the moment, and how I open myself up to the principles can guide me into being at the right place at the right time in relationship to my partner, in relationship to my intention for the right reason. And to a certain degree, a certain kind of shift in understanding of, rather than I just want to destroy the other, but I want to find a systemic solution in relationship with the other. And
here's one question for you, Bruno.
Yes.
How much do you think the discovery of internal principles, the principles of the art, these connection with these principles, do you feel they require any kind of insight or shift in the way we see things?
It's completely linked. Me, I always use my body as a kind of experimentation. So all what I think come from my body, come from my experiences. For example, I some years ago I did a lot of theater, and it forced me to understand why suddenly when you are on stage, you become unnatural, you cut the contact with your partner, you feel the audience, the fear, you feel all these kind of things. But so you feel all this problematic, and you need to understand why is the problem. And the problem most of the time it's yourself. It's the image of that you have of yourself, all your fear, all your beliefs. So it's already the beginning of the spirituality world. I mean, to understand who you are, or who you are not,
Right.
It always come from this kind of experiences for me, so, and because I was working in this heart, one of the principles, it was the awareness of myself.
Say that again.
The awareness of who I am. I mean, why is not working, and why is working? I mean, and the problem could not come from the situation. The problem did not come from the partner, come from no, it comes from me. It become so I need to understand how I behave, how I function, and so it's like you put the light, on something you didn't know before a lot, and it create kind of awareness little by little, who it's more simple. I mean, every situation, like you said, every situation in your daily life is an opportunity to see how the things function, and if you develop your sensitivity, I mean, you are more able to see, more able to hear, you are more able to listen, to feel. You become more aware, and in a way more connect, even if you are already connected. But you are more aware of your connection, and that is the spirituality. I mean, I don't need to sit and to meditate. It can be tools, you know what I mean? But for me, the Aikido, or whatever I do, I told you, even when I did theater, for me, it was one of the big experiences who to put me on the way of the spirituality. You know, it was theater.
Am I understanding you correctly that your availability to the question, who am I, of looking into that direction, supported your discovery of the principles of Aikido or the principles of those movements?
Yes, yes, of course, it's a part of the things. I mean, because most of the time you don't see the situation as she is, because you have much background in your head, you know.
Right.
And in order to let it go, or to let the chance to the situation to teach you what you have to do in a way, you're aware of your fear, of your culture, I don't know, everything. So this process, it's a process to know yourself, to know what you are not, to know what you are.
Yes.
So it's a spiritual practice, but for me it's very concrete. You know, it's like really, yes, it's concrete.
So then, are you saying that Aikido itself is a spiritual practice? Aikido. Would you say Aikido itself is inherently a spiritual practice then?
Everything is spiritual, everything. As soon as you start to go deep in the art, you always come back to the same question. You are. Because what makes your performance difficult in the art you choose, it's yourself. It's your relationship with the circumstances of your art. So you need to ask your question. Okay, yes, who I am. If you start to relax about to become something different that you are, it's a big part of the things, you know. But people, they cannot understand that, because when they start to do something, when they pay for an activity or what, they want to change.
Of course, yeah.
And I think it's one of the most problem is you think that you need to be better, or to be someone else, or I don't know what. So for me, the big question now is, okay, I have to give food to the student, but I don't want also to encourage this idea that they need to change. They just need to be
so how do you encourage it? Or how do you, if you need to give food to the student, but you don't want to encourage the idea that they need to change, how do you feed the idea that they don't need to change, that the situation they're in now is the path, that's the path that leads you?
Yes. So I said to them, just be more aware of what you are, and let the situation live. Let the situation guide you, and but there is no you. In fact, I mean, it's just.
But there's the problem right there.
Yes.
There's the problem right there. For people to come to an understanding that there is no you, for my opinion, they first come to that understanding through the principle, because the only way to taste the principle is for the self to relax a little bit. It just has to relax a little bit, and the principle comes online. And the more the principle comes online, I think the more it's easier. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people hold on to the identity. It could be trauma, it could be it could be beliefs, it could be a lot of things, a lot of reasons. But if you just can put all that aside and just trust that I think the principle leads us upstream to the source. You know, like in the Alps, there's the source of all the Rhine and the Rhone and the Po River and the Danube. They have the source is in the Alps, up in the very top. That's the source. you can enter the diversity of all these different rivers. And like you were saying, Bruno, it's that situation. If you can let go into that situation, I believe it will lead you up river if you're not identified and holding on. But there's also the practice of going to the source. And when you taste the source, if you go downstream, it's all just another, that's the unity and the diversity.
Bruno, you mentioned something about, getting how a student gets trapped into the desire for change. And of course, I think it's natural for a student to want to come in and say, hey, I want to improve my capacity to respond in challenging environments. And I don't think that intention is necessarily bad, but it's that sense of when students feel like, okay, I'm not good enough, or I'm not complete enough, or I'm not enough. Who I am is not enough to meet the moment. I'm lacking. So I have to push myself out of shape and try to conform to an idea of myself or somebody else's idea of something which is not authentic, something which is artificial, and attempt to try to be that something outside of myself in order to fundamentally improve who I am. And therein lies, I think, the kind of the problem that people find, because they're not centered into an authentic experience of themselves and realizing that whoever they are at whatever level they're at is enough to respond to this moment. And within that response, they can discover something new. And as they discover something new, they evolve, they grow, they change. But the change process isn't about leaving their authentic nature of self, but actually coming back home to it and being able to approach the moment from a place of curiosity, of that desire to, as you said, celebrate, or to dance. And in that dance, dancing not as a banal experience, but as this self-expression of your inner state of being, to really be authentic to who you are and authentic to the relationship that you're in, is getting the student to take kind of responsibility and be centered in themselves, at ease with who they are at this point in time, and then yet aligned with a direction that they want to grow into, and that they're capable of meeting the moment where they're at. And the practice then helps give the framework for that kind of evolution without them needing to be inauthentic or untrue to themselves. But that I think is a very delicate place to play, and especially under the fact, as you stated, Miles, that we're working in a container that mimics the experience of conflict. We're putting ourselves under pressure in order to be able to discover greater understandings of ourselves and greater experiences of ourselves. And that's not an easy thing to put a student under pressure and then say, okay, now let go, and let go of the holding patterns. And
yeah, it's like, Bruno, there's an old saying in the spiritual traditions about enlightenment. It goes, everybody wants to be enlightened. Everybody comes to meditate and be with the teacher. Everybody wants to be enlightened, but nobody's willing to change. And it's the same thing in Aikido. Many people are coming to Aikido to master Aikido, but at the end of the day, are they willing to change? Are they willing to kind of, work on this situation? Sure, it's fine as it is. It's the situation. We start there, but will it move them up? Will it move them upstream towards the source or not? At the end of the day, many people, I found that, and it's okay. I'm actually okay with that many students come to Aikido, they're not really interested in changing. They're interested in, like you were saying, Patrick, in adding on top of who they already are. But fundamentally, for the maybe we can talk about mastery, but for mastery to come through, the self really has to be integrated, but also get out of the way. And for that to happen, it's sometimes it's too much to ask for people. But that's okay as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
As we can follow, you can do Aikido as a path of power. People do follow that. You can do Aikido as a path of spirituality. Something that is not path of power. Basically, means it's for the ego, for the self. A path of selflessness, or a spiritual path that it goes beyond the self. It takes you beyond who you are. And I'm just curious, do you see a distinction in that, or do you make a distinction in that?
of course, for me, I mean, for me, it's a path of peace. I mean, how can I be free even if the situation is put me under pressure? How can feel ease? So in Aikido, it's a martial conflict situation, but if someone in daily life tell you something bad, how you will react? I mean, even if the weather is not good, how you will react, whatever. So I want just, yes, feel this peaceful state. It didn't mean that the things will be marvelous all the time, but everything become relative, you know. I like this image of the ocean and the water, you know, and you have a different shape of waves, strong one, small one, whatever. But in deep sense of nature, they are all water. As soon as you really feel that you are water, okay, you are different. Maybe you are a smaller wave, and you will, before you want it to become a big wave, a stronger wave. But after it become anecdotic because the nature is the same. So so the waves become the celebration, you know, of the nature.
That's great. That's that transformation. That's when you made that move.
Yes,
So we see the diversity is actually the celebration of unity,
so
not the enemy of unity.
So I want to give this taste in my teaching now, because I don't care. I don't care of the technique. I don't care of EQ. I don't care of. I mean, we will finish under the ground, you know. So I don't care to become someone or to be. I just want to feel the nature, to feel the life, and yes, to be more aware of that. So I want to give this taste to people. That's why I focus on principle and I focus on unity, diversity.
Diversity and unity, or unity and diversity. Sorry, it's basically the same either way. It's that could be taken in a few different ways, but you know, it could be a polarity that's positive, negative, like opposite polarity. There's unity where everybody feels safe and secure, and there's a lot of sameness, and you feel relaxed. And then there's diversity, even though that usually has a positive meaning, but it's a lot of difference, and it requires somehow being creative and innovative. These two things, when they're actually held together, they're a positive polarity, and the unity is always supporting the diversity, and the diversity is always kind of bringing to life the unity. And in a way, that's kind of the sense that I get, that our conversation, whether we're zeroing down to how we kind of approach, you know, in a concrete way Aikido, or if we're just talking, you know, philosophically or in principles, that these two things are completely different, but at the same time there's a spectrum, and the unity is on one end of the spectrum, and the diversity is on it, but it's the same spectrum. That they're actually very much the same thing, and yeah. So
I would say no. I'm waiting the moment that we will experiment concretely and physically.
Yeah, me too. I'm very much looking forward to it.
Sure.
Because as I told you before, I'm someone very. I mean, I'm in the body. I mean, I use the body and all the mind and concept come from the body. So I'm much more practitioner than speaker.
You know, your image of the ocean and the waves, I think, is a good one. For I feel that image speaks a lot to me with regards to seeing the nature of diversity and the nature of how the forms of different water, forms of different waves can be different forms, different shapes, different sizes, but the nature of water is one. And that unity inside that inside the different forms, and how Aikido has struggled with that in so many aspects, because so many different forms of Aikido became polarized in communication with each other. You either do this form or you do that form, and if you're doing this form, you're correct. If you're doing that form, you're incorrect. And that kind of being a dynamic in the communication in the early years of as Aikido became formulated, how schools became forms, and then they all attempted to take the position of being the correct, quote unquote, the correct form. But to look at understanding and exploring the nature of the internal principles of Aikido, and being able to bring about a dialogue and an exploration of that, and honor the diverse forms, because obviously your form, Bruno, and my form and Miles's form, and we all have different forms, and we all have different ways of fundamentally relating through the body. But I'm hoping, and I have faith that we're going to come into contact with a lot of similar principles that we all fundamentally coalesce around, and that we're exploring and expressing through the relationship. And in that, it's my full trust and faith that we're going to find a lot of common ground and a lot of unity, and appreciate also the diversity, because if we were all unified, it would be quite boring. And if there was no unity in the diversity, there would be no common ground. So that, as you said, Miles, that kind of positive polarity, where they become supportive of each other. The diversity supports the unity, and the unity frames the diversity, is what I'm hoping we're going to be able to appreciate and celebrate in the seminar that we do next year. And I'm very inspired to be on the mat with both of you, and I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes.